Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the 2025 webinar for Land and Water Conservation Fund. I'm going to run through the agenda really quickly, and then I'm going to turn it up. Well, I'm going to open up us to give introductions. So welcome and introductions. We've got a poll for you. We're going to do an overview of the LWCF grant cycle timeline, the program overview, application tips, and then Q&A. And we just, as we're going through this information, please make sure that your question benefits the whole group, not a specific project, because you're going to always go to your RRS consultant offline if you have specific project questions. So I wanted to say, hey, my name is Vonda Martin. I am the grant manager for the grants and I'm the manager for the grants and outreach program, and I'm going to let my team sitting here introduce themselves.
I'm Aiden Manley. I'm our LWCF compliance specialist.
I'm Lillian Heaton. I'm the grant specialist primarily for the state grants, but I jump in to support wherever I can.
I'm Sophia Olson, grant specialist, mainly in federal grants, specifically LWCF.
All right, so RRS is joining us today, so thank you so much for their support and hard work. Charlene, would you like to say anything and or introduce your team?
Yeah, we can do that. I'm Charlene Smith. I'm the director of RRS, and thank everybody for joining today to talk about Land and Water Conservation Fund. I will say we have the chat windows. If you open up chat on the view, if you have any questions, just pop them in there, and RRS we'll be looking at those and facilitating those with Lillian and Vonda to make sure those are answered. So we can go around real quick on our consultants just so you can get a face with a name. So Trey, I'll start with you.
Sure. Trey Fouché, Central North Region Consultant, which is...
Uh-oh, you froze up. Oh, no. We'll have a map here shortly. Blake Covington's in the West. I'll let you introduce yourself, Blake.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Blake Covington. I'm the consultant out of the western part of the state, which is essentially the mountains. I'm happy to be here.
Okay. Scott.
Good morning. I'm Scott Payne. I'm the RRS consultant for the Northeast, kind of Wake County to Dare County and across the Virginia North Carolina border.
All right. And Brittany is mic'd up today.
Yes, I am. I am Brittany Ship, and I cover the Southeast region. So I'm mostly coastal, but come into Greene County, Sampson, Columbus, that area.
Okay. And Terry Stowers.
Yes, I'm Terry Stowers. I'm the consultant for the Central South. My region goes from basically Hickory to Fayetteville across the southern part of the state.
All right. And I think Alex Gadet, I think I saw Alex jump in. Alex is our
here.
Outreach. Okay.
Yep, outreach consultant, region, wherever y'all need me.
And Alex and Terry are in the same room, it looks like. And then we have Holly Henry. She's the magic behind everything.
Hello.
She's just waiting. So yeah, and somebody already posted a question online. We will have these slides available, and we're recording the video, so we'll have those available later as well. So, all right, Vonda, thanks.
Well, Charlene, you can continue if you're ready for the poll.
Okay, I've got a poll for everybody with a few questions on it. And if everybody can answer those for your group, I know some of you are with a group, so just like have you, the first one is about Land and Water Fund and Land and Water Conservation Fund, or the North Carolina Land and Water Fund. And then just kind of see if has anybody applied for LWCF before, or for a second question is any other federal grants, because they're their own animal.
Isn't that the truth?
Let's see, what about 42? Let me see how many people. Most people have. All right. Any other responses before I end the poll?
Is she gonna do the results now?
All right. I will go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So I assume y'all can see that. It looks different on mine. Do y'all see the results? Okay.
No, we can just see our presentation.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So is LWCF the same as the North Carolina Land and Water Fund? A couple people said yes. Majority of people said no. And then 38% of you said you're not sure. So the answer is no. They're two different. The North Carolina Land and Water Fund used to be known as the Clean Water Management Grant Program. I'm probably getting it wrong now since they've switched. But they're two very different programs. And you'll learn more about that today. North Carolina Land and Water Fund is a North Carolina-based clean water grant, where this is a federal grant. Have you ever applied before? 10 people yes, and 22 said no, they have not. But 23 people have said they've applied for other federal grants. So that may be helpful to you. All right, Vonda.
All right, fantastic. Well, we're going to go to the local grant program schedule, and I'm just going to go right to the meat of it. The deadline is November the 2nd is your application deadline of 2025. So the actual announcement for LWCF went out May 1st. You can see that we are currently today in our webinar. Recreation Resources Service is always your first point of contact. And then funding recommendations will come in the spring of 26, and grant recipients will be announced in the summer of 26. So it'll be a 6-month turnaround, and we will be announcing who was selected. So, and Charlene said, yes, we're going to have a map. And so you can see the western part with Blake, and I'm going to get this wrong, but I'm going to try. Central north with Trey, central south with Terry, southeast with Brittany, and northeast with Scott. Woo! Way to go, Vonda. So these are it for your county and your city or your town. This is how, and you can find that on RRS NCSU. If you need a shortcut, and then you should save that in your favorites so that you can get to your point of contact. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Lillian now. And Vonda is done. So she has left the building.
Except for questions later. So the Land and Water Conservation Fund, as Charlene mentioned, is very different than North Carolina Land and Water. It is a federal grant program, the state assistance program that supports public lands and waters, which in the Division of Parks and Recreation, we split between supporting state parks and local parks. And we have a strategic planning meeting at the beginning of every federal fiscal year to determine what percentage goes to the state side and what percentage goes to the local side.
Which is October.
The federal fiscal year starts in October, yes. So it's $1 for dollar up to $500,000, just like PARTIF, which a lot of people are familiar with. All the proposed projects should align with priorities that are outlined in the North Carolina Outdoor Recreation Plan, which SCORP, the acronym is State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. We have to do one of those every 5 years to be eligible for the stateside funding from the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And then, of course, any land acquired or developed with LWCF funds must be operated and maintained in perpetuity for public recreation, public outdoor recreation.
So applicant eligibility, who is eligible? North Carolina counties, incorporated municipalities, federally recognized Native American tribes. Nonprofit organizations, associations, and other private entities are not eligible for LWCF. Eligible projects, what is eligible? Acquiring land to be used for outdoor recreation, development of a new park, or the renovation of facilities in an existing park. All projects must meet the eligibility requirements that are found in the LWCF manual and at least one of the state's goals from the current SCORP plan. Plans for the development should be based on the needs of the public, the expected use, and the type and character of the project area. Emphasis should be given to the health and safety of users, accessibility to the general public, and the protection of the recreation and natural values of the area. You can visit the link for the current LWCF manual for more details on eligible projects and eligible costs.
I'll drop some of those links in the chat window.
Great.
So is the grant a good fit for your project? For acquisition, it's good to let your seller know that this process takes a while. Ideally, it takes a year, but it can take up to 2, so they have to be patient. That's the big thing to if you're deciding to apply, is that you have to be both responsive and patient. There's a lot of hurry up and wait in LWCF because after it goes through the DPR review, the National Park Service also has to do their programmatic and compliance review. And so they, not being as familiar with North Carolina necessarily, have lots more questions. So there'll be a lot of times where we're like emailing you for a good 3 weeks over it with questions, and then you don't hear anything for another 3 weeks.
If there is an urgency to acquire the land, NPS in some cases will approve a waiver of retroactivity that is good for 1 year. The acquisition must be made within that year that the waiver is active, and the project sponsor must be awarded prior to the expiration of the waiver. You'll just need to demonstrate why it's urgent to acquire the land as soon as possible.
And for matching funds, we say non-federal funds. There are 2 exceptions to that. The Recreational Trails Program can match LWCF, and what is the other one? Community Development, CDBG.
Mm-hmm. Development. If your project is nearly ready or can begin within 1 year of award and still completed within 3 years of award, it might be a good fit for LWCF. Construction cannot begin until the project has been awarded and the contract is signed. NEPA level reviews are required for development projects. Response times can vary among the agencies, so you'll want to get started on those early on in the application process. Lillian.
Nope.
NEPA.
Matching funds.
Yeah, I just did matching funds, so we're good.
So I just want to say too, with your environmental review, there is a checklist that we could provide you that gives you a head start on what you will be responsible for, even though LWCF is much more involved than just what we provide in a checklist, but it does give you a start on the property where the project will be held.
So acquisition, it's for lands, wetlands, and waters for public outdoor recreation. The big note here is that any land acquired with LWCF funds must be developed and open, at least in passive recreation, open to public within 3 years of the closeout date. So have that in mind when you apply for acquisition. And then for development, the perpetuity restriction applies to facilities developed with LWCF. So that's something to consider in your operation and maintenance plan. Kind of our thing we say in the team is start where you want to finish.
So application guidance, contact your RRS consultant early on in the process to discuss your project, make sure it's a good fit for LWCF or could potentially be a better fit for other grant programs. Your project should be the result of a planning process that reflects the public's preferences. And we will link to the application guide in the presentation and throughout the slide deck, so you can understand how your project will be evaluated.
Yeah, and I also wanted to brag on my team that the application guide for LWCF, it's the first one that we know of, and it is not the greatest reading, but you should read it in its entirety so that you understand the nuances of this federal program, because there are many of those. So good job, team.
No, thanks. Yeah, that'll be the best tool in your toolbox, is that application guide. So read it thoroughly and refer back to it frequently.
And speaking of it, it's on the division's website in addition to all of the forms that are required. And so these templates that are linked on our webpage are the ones you have to use for the application. I know there's lots of old varieties still floating around there. I have probably 15 different versions of the A&R form saved in a file, but please use the ones that are updated on the website.
And fillable.
And fillable.
And
Yeah.
fillable, y'all. We have taken the federal forms and made them fillable.
Tremendous
Woo!
progress. So this is the checklist that is found in the application guide, listing all the documents that you'll need to submit with your application. And all the documents are required by the application deadline of November 3rd. Any incomplete applications will not be reviewed, and you'll have to wait till the following cycle. Some application tips, just reiterating what we've said throughout the presentation. You want to start early with your application, contact RRS, consult with the SHPO and NEPA agencies as early on as possible, read the application guide, keep it simple, start with your budget and build your application from there, being sure to mention all the items that are in your budget throughout your entire application. Maintain consistency across the application documents, separate maps, and begin with the end in mind. And we will, after the next poll, we'll pass it over to Aiden, who will talk about the post-completion compliance and stewardship.
Okay. And before we get started on that, there were a couple of questions. John asked a question: what's the typical timeline between announcing the grant awards and the grantee getting under contract?
45 days to give them time to present it to council or a chief elected official to sign the contract.
All right, thanks. So 45 days, and that, because most communities, you need to get it approved to, well, you have, somebody has to sign the grant. And y'all are doing it all through DocuSign now, I believe.
I would like to, but they still have to be notarized on the local level. And
Okay,
if you
it's a
have
federal
a notary,
grant.
they'll do it that way. But to be fair, not everybody has an e-notary on staff. So we haven't moved to that entirely.
But that would be something for you to check. Do you have an e-notary available that also speeds up your contract time?
Okay. And then Scott had a comment just on the getting the environmental review. There's a lot, sometimes there can be a lot of time required, so you might have to even start now for an application next year or so in some cases. The North Carolina agencies for NEPA requirement, which you have SHPO, which is the State Historic Preservation Office. Make sure you contact them, as 90 days turnaround. The U.S. Corps of Engineers and U.S. Fish and, well, Corps of Engineers 45 days, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife is 30 days. So again, go through the guide and the document and see where you need to get environmental review and information from, and just know it can take time. And some of those federal agencies are probably shorter on staff and might take more time. Let's see, what else? Oh, Trey, you answered. Emily had a question. Can you tell us again what the two exceptions were to federal matching funds? So that was CDBG, what's that, Community Development Block Grant, and Recreational Trails Fund. Those are both federal funds that can match LWCF. All other, no, can't do it.
but state funds also match federal
Mhm.
funds.
Yeah. True. All right. So let's see. Hang on. Let me find the other poll. I'm getting there. All right. This one's on LWCF parks. Do you know if you're a park system or if you have a LWCF assisted park in your community? And then a little quiz on when did North Carolina first receive LWCF funding? 65, 82, or 2001? All right. All right, we got these folks. I'm going to end it. If you want to answer, jump in there. I don't have any prizes or anything. Extra points on your application, Vonda.
Yeah, no, nope.
No, okay. Can't do that. Yeah, so 14 of you say you have at least one park, with 6 others saying several parks funded, and 6 people saying they don't have any LWCF parks. When did North Carolina first receive funding for LWCF? And the answer is 1965. So parks have been around for a while, and they will stay in perpetuity, which is a very long time. So we'll turn it over to Aiden for talking about compliance. So if you do have one of those parks.
Yeah, just I guess a note on that, the poll answer. It's good that most of you do know that you have an LWCF park. For the 6 of you that says you don't, I would bet that one of you of the 6 probably does have a park that you're not aware of. Yeah, because of that in perpetuity note, and because of the answer that 1965 was the first year it was funded. Some of these parks are very old. So kind of the purpose of the LWCF is to maintain these sites in public outdoor recreation use and to assure they remain accessible to the general public, and that word in perpetuity keeps coming up. It's important that these sites remain accessible and protected for the people of your communities for years and decades to come. And the exact elements of what's in these parks may change over time, or they may have changed from the 60s or 70s or 80s. But that running theme of outdoor recreation is preserved. These 4 bullet points I have here, because compliance is a fairly complex and each situation is unique in terms of compliance. I just have a few bullet points I'm going to talk through here that are the kind of essentials if you have an LWCF assisted site already, or if you're planning on applying, because knowing what your compliance requirements is really important to crafting a project that's going to be easier for you to manage in the future as well. So knowing your project boundaries, that's the biggest thing. A lot of these projects, like we've mentioned, are from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they've undergone changes. They've undergone amendments. They've undergone conversions. And I'll kind of talk about what that means a little bit later as well. But the project boundaries may have changed over time. The record keeping may not have been consistent from the 60s or 70s or 80s. But knowing what your project boundaries are, having an up-to-date knowledge of that, so you can know that if anything is changing within those boundaries, you need to review the LWCF requirements or contact your Harris consultant, or both. Akin to that is knowing your project scope. The project scope kind of covers the elements that were funded originally. However, the project scope does not necessarily match the project boundaries. Sometimes your scope was for playground equipment and basketball courts in 1975, but the whole park was restricted with the LWCF compliance requirements. So not just the footprint of the elements itself. But knowing the project scope is important as well, because if you are, changing the elements of that project scope, sometimes you have to go through LWCF compliance actions in order to do that. We've touched on it multiple times, but the biggest point and the biggest, I guess, red flag for if you need to go through your RS consultant to look at compliance actions is if public access is going to be restricted, either partially or entirely. That's the big thing, is the public has to have access to these sites. Forever. Yeah. And there's multiple mechanisms to, if you do have to, partially restrict access for a short period of time, for a variety of reasons. But it is one of those things where if you know you have to do that at one of your sites, contact your RRS consultant. They're a really invaluable resource. They're going to have a lot of quick answers for you. They're also going to know if you need to run anything through the state or eventually through the National Park Service as well. And it can save a lot of time just sending them a quick note, instead of getting into some of these compliance actions if you do something without knowing whether it was restricted or not. The first point here, inspections, those are done every 5 years, and they need to be done every 5 years, as well as a review of those submitted to the National Park Service by the state. For the most part, they're self-inspections, so you can kind of certify that your park is still matching the project scope and the boundary has not been encroached upon. No compliance actions are needed. We had sent out a self-inspection form to as many people as we could reach for these. A lot of people did respond. Thank you if you did respond. If you didn't respond, you're now going to get a visit from me. So we're going to do on-site inspections. Your RS consultant may have already reached out to you, or they will be reaching out to you over the coming months for on-site visits for the LWCF projects. Just take a look around, make sure that there aren't any major compliance actions, or if there are, to get that process started. Some of the other, these are just kind of the key compliance actions or mechanisms. There are more, and I'm not going to go too deep into details because there are a lot of different specifics for each one of those. Just generally speaking, obsolete facilities, you don't necessarily have to keep, updating facilities if it's from the 60s, 70s, 80s. These have usable lifespans. You can obsolete facilities if they're no longer safe or if they've reached the end of their usable life. That's kind of an official process. Significant change of use. So that's one thing to keep in mind when obsoleting facilities. You can change the elements to an LWCF park, but if it's a significant change, that is something that requires specific paperwork and approval by the National Park Service. So that's why it's important to know your project scope. Commercial activities are allowed, but they have certain restrictions based on them. Like if you have concessions and stuff like that, again, you may need to require approval for that on your LWCF property. Same with like commercial signage and stuff like that as well. Indoor facilities, sometimes there are pre-existing indoor facilities that were allowed on LWCF property. That's mostly not allowed anymore. And constructing indoor facilities requires definite compliance actions and may require conversions if you're planning on constructing indoor facilities. The exceptions for that would be if it's primarily to support outdoor recreation. And again, the specifics of that is all in the manual, or if you contact your RRS consultant. There's also temporary non-conforming uses if you need to restrict public access temporarily for a period of up to 6 months, whether you're constructing something, or a common one we see is if the Department of Transportation requires access to the park to do a road widening or something like that. Again, that's just kind of a specific compliance action, but knowing that that's a possibility is useful. And then the big one is conversions. If you need to permanently restrict access to the public to a portion of your park, and there's a variety of other things that can trigger conversions. For example, if you have a temporary non-conforming use that lasts longer than 6 months, basically you are required to replace the land that has lost outdoor public recreation with equivalent value land. And there's other requirements, such as making sure it's serving roughly the same demographics, the same recreation needs, stuff like that. But that's kind of what we want to avoid when we're planning applications, is understanding that can be another costly and time intensive process. So understanding when you're crafting your application that you're planning to avoid any conversions in the future. I think that's generally it. There's of course a lot more to compliance, but the specifics, you can always get into that with your RS consultant and me.
And I did want to add also that compliance is important to us. It could affect the state's apportionment, which is $7.8 million, or it was in the previous year. which is divided between local parks and state parks. So another thing that we're also doing that will benefit you and your community as well as Recreation Resource Service is we are digitizing our LWCF files and placing them in folders so that we have access to them, to the big things like your site map that has your LWCF boundary, your budget, what year the project was let, and that type of thing. But Recreation Resource Service also has a map on their website. And Charlene, this might be a good time to talk about that.
I can share it. Let's see.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, and just adding to that, compliance can be it can be a word that has negative connotations to it. But just know that like myself and IRS, we're here to help you guys, find the cleanest solutions if you have anything that crops up that requires compliance actions. Like we're here to support getting back into compliance. Like I say, it helps us all. It helps us, maintain our really good relationship with National Park Service in relation to compliance, in relation to, getting a significant amount of funding for the LWCF.
Yeah. Okay. Here, I will share the screen with the grant. Let's see. Replace the current share. And get everything where I need it over here. And so if you think about, remember the first grant was awarded in 65. So the files that we have, they do smell a bit musty, and they have actual carbon copies. So they've been around for a while.
Yes.
For you folks that know what carbon copies are.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the grant locator map. I think I dropped that in the chat window. So it has both PARTF and LWCF and a few others, and there's some links here. But you can also turn layers on and off, so we can look at just the park locations. And let's see. Yeah, I was looking up one in Winston-Salem. Oops, let's see. So I'll put in Sprague Street because I know there's a park over there. All right, so here's the park, and I'll pull up the legend here. So if you click on it, it will pop up information. There's usually a couple. The point has some basic information, but this boundary of your LWCF boundary has a little more. But we don't have the project scope on these. So if I click on this table down at the bottom, you might have to click twice. You can see that this one was started in 1967 and closed that year. $105,000. That probably built a lot in 1967. So remember, on the conversions and replacement, it's on today's dollars. So but this map, you should be able to put in your street, your park name, and it'll appear in this window and it'll show up. So here's like Kernersville Lake Park. And you can just toggle through, if you can see me toggling on there, to see, at least get the project number. This is project number 898. That's from 1987. And that's all we have on it. But as these files get digitized, hopefully we can add more information through this interface to include info. And the boundaries, if they're green, they have been assessed and kind of updated. If they're blue, we haven't gotten to it. We want to confirm parcels, and that might be something, Aiden, I'm not sure if that's something you're working with. And then some have easements or even legacy. So we do need to kind of confirm everything. If you see it on here, it's like, okay, it's pretty a good idea that this is an LWCF site. High Point is crazy. We'll just go ahead and say that. Is High Point on here today? They have lots of grants and have had conversions, but they do a great job. Let us know what's going on, and we've been able to work with those. So there's always, we want to help you resolve problems, but just know that there's always a process to go through especially with the federal government. And going through that. So just check in with us and find out. We'll figure out what you're trying to do and what you would like to do, and can help you through that. And seems like, were there any other questions on here? Oh, Scott had a question for Vonda and Sophia about the Dingle Johnson Act. People are always asking about that. Can those funds pass through North Carolina Wildlife Resources be used as a match? And Scott, you might need to clarify. It's pass-through money with the wildlife.
It's federal money, and it's not expressly listed like RTP and CDBG. So just a question, can that be used as a match? Or if someone proposes like a boat ramp item, will LWCF fund that, or are they going to ask about Dingle Johnson funding it first?
They do ask about Dingle Johnson funding, if it is being provided. And I will have to get some more information on that to find out if it can be passed through to NC Wildlife.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, they definitely ask about Dingle Johnson though.
So this is the Q&A portion of the webinar. So if anybody has a question, you can take yourself off mute and ask, or you can put it in the chat, whatever your preference is.
What do we have? We can call on people. Let's see.
You'd be like the teacher.
So we wanted to give you information on LWCF, and there's a lot of it on our website. And so if you have questions, if you don't have a specific question now, and you have some after you have a wonderful reading weekend with your with the application guide, just reach out to your consultant with RS, and they'll be able to assist you. And if they have questions, you know, they'll reach out to us, but they're definitely your first point of contact.
If you're going to include a restroom or boathouse facility, that has to be decided and approved up front for acquisition. So anytime there's an acquisition project, we do need to see a development plan prior to approval. And that development has to be completed within 3 years of closure of the acquisition project.
And if it's a pre-existing facility, again, there's the requirement that it be used to primarily support outdoor recreation. Historically, I think we've seen restrooms and boathouse facilities would be approved, but
yes,
it would need to specifically be approved for each case.
So yes, you would need it on your conceptual plan at the point of applying for an acquisition project.
And that plan is conceptual. It's not engineering drawings. It's kind of, you know, where it's going to go, what the size. But yeah, restrooms and boathouse are usually support facilities. Well, boathouse might be actual recreation.
Do we need to apply before a project has broken ground for development? Yes. You cannot break ground on your project until it has been awarded.
And you have a contract.
And you have a signed contract.
Yes.
Yeah. So you cannot apply for any projects that are already in progress.
Yeah, any costs that take place before the contract would be ineligible. So.
Anything else? All right. So you can feel free to reach out to your RRS consultant if you have any further questions.
We've got one more.
There is one more. Are comp master plans time restricted for land acquisition?
Do you mean whether they count towards? Oh, the comp plan's 9 years old, so I'm not sure how the scoring goes on this.
It's the same as part of it's 10 years or older.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
You need to get busy, Nick. It's going to run out in a year. No points.
No points if it's older than 10
older than
years.
10.
No
Yeah.
points if it's older than 10.
Well, Nick, you can jump on that. Knock it out. Yes. True.
So Charlene, this is Alice Keene in Pitt County. I know when we did our first LWCF, you could use in-kind or donated land, etc. But it seems now that we have to have the dollar for dollar. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, they're in kind.
Okay. So they're no longer doing in-kind service?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So that doesn't work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Lillian, does that include donated land value?
Oh, forgot about
Donated
that.
land value is eligible as a match, yes.
Okay.
In-kind services donation is not.
But it has to be full
you for that.
donation, correct?
Yeah.
You can't do a bargain sale? That doesn't count?
I mean, you can do it, but you don't get credit for the
Yeah.
value.
Here's a couple other tips. Only show what you're requesting from LWCF on your site plan. Don't overmatch. It doesn't help your project. Actually, NPS would rather it be dollar for dollar with no overmatch. I know for part if we keep that data, but LWCF and the National Park Service just wants a dollar for dollar match for the facilities that they're paying for only. If there's other facilities on the park, make sure that your legend shows that they're the color of the existing facilities, but whatever LWCF is paying for, make sure that the color code matches for just the facilities that LWCF is paying for. Any other tips?
Just to clarify, the dollar for dollar thing is because it's up to 50% eligible for reimbursement. So if you're overmatched, you're not going to get the same. It could reduce the amount you get in that line item.
And Alice has another follow-up.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to be clear on the donated land, so we could use the appraised value of donated land that we know we cannot accept until we would have a signed contract for part of the match. Is that right?
That's
Yes,
correct.
ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so if any of you, if you're talking with the landowner and they're talking about donating some property to you for a park, do not take title to it yet. And you can reach out to your consultant. If it's urgent, there is a way to do it's called a waiver of retroactivity, where you submit a letter on why it's urgent. Like we're going to lose this property if we're not able to buy it now. They'll sell it, for some development. So that can give you a waiver so that it would be eligible even though you had ownership of it. But don't transfer it before. There's been some communities have done that and they just lost value of that would have been their full match probably. Talk to
And
your
do demonstrate the urgency in your request.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just say we want to purchase it right now. You have to demonstrate why it's an urgent need to go ahead with it.
And for your appraised value versus the tax value, you're going to have to do an appraisal anyway. And so it's a yellow book appraisal for federal grants, not just, I don't know the difference between a regular appraisal and a yellow book, but yellow book is required. And if it exceeds a threshold, you have to.
Yes.
I don't think that applies to us because it's only 500,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Strike that. But it has to be a yellow book appraisal.
It has to be yellow book and there has to be a third party
Third party.
certifying that it meets yellow book standards.
Yeah.
So
I would also add, and Scott made a comment that LWCF waivers are good for 12 months and Part F is good for 24. But I would encourage you to make sure that the urgency is truly urgent and get as close as you possibly can to the starting time of that urgency before requesting the waiver. Because once the waiver expires, there isn't a extension or request another waiver because you submitted it because there was urgency. So just make sure that it is truly urgent and that all those ducks are in a row to proceed with that along with your application.
Yeah.
And
It's a little
remember,
juggling.
this is a little different from with Partif. If you're familiar with Partif, been working with us, I know your consultant will send things to Vonda's office and we can usually turn around things. But because this is a federal grant, a lot of things have to go up another level to the National Park Service, which makes it slower turnaround time sometimes. So just keep that in mind. I think we've been saying plan way ahead and expect you cannot do this application at the last minute.
You
No.
I'm
cannot.
trying to and I think
And
there's
probably
another question.
Start at the last minute. Don't call your RS consultant because they can't save you.
Do you want to say something?
Nick had a follow-up question about
It's
land.
just for development, Nick. Yeah, if the dollar for dollar and the overmatch comment is just for development, not acquisition only.
Mm.
But acquisition only, the same caveat applies. It's up to 50%. So if you submit and say the land's going to cost $2 million and you actually only pay $1 million, it's still up to 50% of what you paid, not what you originally submitted.
So do you want to share what needs to happen so who is providing the SharePoint folder? Do we provide that to the consultant?
Yeah, so once you're ready to submit your application and you've already worked with your RS consultant, we will set up a SharePoint folder for you to drop all of your documents into that SharePoint folder.
So that's once you're ready to submit. That's a little different than we've been doing.
Yeah, the completed application, if they're ready to start submitting it prior to November 3rd, they can start putting documents in at any time. We just need to be made aware to set up a SharePoint folder for them.
Yeah, the SharePoint folder, what Trey's getting at is that's where you can put your application documents that RRS can look at and help you work through. And they have to be complete and ready for DPR review by the application deadline because we'll remove access after that for the local government.
Yeah, if the RS consultants are going to review, we would encourage you contacting us so we can work with a DPR to get that SharePoint folder set up. So we can review everything in one place. And then when you're ready, you can put a final folder and put everything in there. It'll just be easier for everybody to work out of one folder for your application.
Because if y'all remember the checklist, there's a long list of documents that come with an LWCF application.
Yeah. It's worth it though, y'all. It's worth it. It preserves the property forever. And so even DOT doesn't get to encroach in it without replacing the land. So that's one of our biggest customers on conversions. But the highway system is the highway system, right? And it does give you opportunity to either start another park if you have parking and everything, that if the land is large enough for you to have all of the essential pieces that make up a park. You have access to it from a road. You can have a parking lot plus have it open to the public in 3 years. So I mean, it's a great grant cycle. It is very involved. So if you are looking to do LWCF and you're even thinking about matching the state funding through the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund, I would encourage you to get LWCF first and then apply for your Parks and Recreation Trust Fund, not the other way around, because LWCF is competitive. And it's harder than our state funding. So, and I know you may be saying harder. Yeah, it's a little bit more involved. So, and David, we have an opportunity for Build America, Buy America. We haven't heard that it has been discontinued. But we also have a process with MPS where they will review it in advance. We've done enough, they've done enough with facilities and that type of stuff where we can get a pre-award BABA, Build America, Buy America. So they do have a process in place
For a waiver
to
yeah.
provide feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Scott has issued a quote that forever is a long time. Can you, when you're applying for a project, carve out a section of your proposed park that could allow for a future development that might not fit into LWCF, like a big indoor community center, or the city wants to put a fire station there?
Yes, as long as the section that's carved out is self-sufficient and doesn't rely on any other adjacent areas of the park, you can, yes.
Yeah, those compliance requirements are why it's important to take some time to craft what will be your boundary, your park boundary.
Yeah, so if you know something's coming in the future, you know, don't include that in your boundary. Like if you know a fire station's coming or a recreation center's going to be built, it'll be cleaner for you if you leave that portion out of your LWCF boundary. Well, we hope that you learned a little bit more about LWCF, like we have reiterated over and over. RRS is your first point of contact. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are we're always excited to help local governments put parks on the ground. We know how important they are. We know why it matters, and we're all in that business. So let us know if we can help you.
Yeah, and I dropped a survey link in the chat if everybody can fill that out. That'll give us some information and have some open-ended questions in case you have something else you want to ask us or ways that we can work together to help you.
I can't say enough about RS, so make sure you reach out to your consultant. They got your back. They've got your back. So that's a great place to start. And they'll come to us if they need any questions. We kind of stay behind the scenes. So reach out to them if you have any additional questions. And if we have questions that come through the survey, your consultant likely will reach out to you with those answers. So thanks again for joining us today, and good luck.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.